guys, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in the sewing room and I am going to do a video tutorial on how to machine bind a quilt or a project that you're working on. I have done lots of videos that have needed binding, and a lot of times I'll show you parts of it, but it's not been really detailed, or it's in one of mine that I did a long time ago, and I have learned a few things and have gotten a lot better at my machine binding. So I thought I would show you today how to do machine binding, and that way whenever we're doing a project, I won't have to include it in the video tutorial that I'm working on. I can just send you to this video. So hand binding a quilt is really nice, and I've done that for many years. But since I have learned to machine bind, I have rarely hand bound any of my quilts that I have done lately. Now, there might be one that will come up if it's a very important quilt. I feel like it's going to be an heirloom or something like that, and I may hand bind it. And I don't mind hand binding, it just takes a lot of time, and I don't have that time right now. So I have started machine binding, and I find that it looks really nice. So I'm just going to share some of the tips and tricks that I've learned as we have been making projects and as I have been making bindings. So first off, what we need to do is decide how wide we want our binding strips. Now, I usually do 2.5 inches in width. A lot of people will do 2 1/4 or 2 inches, and that is all personal preference. It doesn't matter what width you use, as long as it gets around and binds that quilt edge. So if you have a preference, that's great. Do what you like. If not, you might try the 2.5 inch and see if you like it. If you feel like it's too loose, you can always drop it down to 2 1/4, and then you can drop it down further if you need to. But I find 2.5 works perfect for me. So the first thing you do is you need to find out what amount of binding you need. And so I go to a site on my computer, and it is just a binding calculator. And it's really easy to use, and I'll put a little clip right here showing you how to use that and what that site is. Okay, so what you want to do is put in your search bar binding calculator, and you can put free binding calculator in there too. And the one that I always use is the Quilter's Paradise. It's the one that shows up first on my computer, and so I haven't really seen the other ones, but this is the one I use. So click on that, and it takes you to this page called Binding Calculator, and it talks a little bit about binding and things up here. But right here is what we want to focus on. And so you want to determine what is your width of fabric that you're using for the binding. And the most common is about 43 inches. If yours is different, you can change that number. Then you want to come down here, and it says what is the width of your quilt or your project and what is the length, and they want this in inches. And we have on our pepper quilt that we're going to be binding a length of 28.5, so we can put 28.5, and a width of 14.5, which would be 14.5, and then the binding strip width. And remember, I said that I like to do 2.5 inches, but whatever one that you're wanting to use, you'll type yours in or select it from that drop down menu. And then all you need to do from there is calculate. And once you push that button right down here, it shows what you're going to need. Now you're going to need to have 96 inches altogether of binding to bind that project. We'll need to cut 3 strips that are the width of fabric, and then we will need 1/4 of a yard of fabric to make this binding. So you have all that information right there, and it's so super easy to use. Also, if you were doing bias binding, it has some information down here on how to cut it and what the measurements and size yardage you're going to need to have enough for that project. So this is something that is available on your computer, your phone, whatever device you're using. Just click in free binding calculator and you'll see it pop up. So once you find out how many strips you need to cut for your project, go ahead and cut those strips. And it's always in with the fabric. So when you get your fabric from a store, it's always folded and your selvages are down here and your fold is up here. So if you thought of a whole strip of fabric coming off of a bolt, this is what it would be. And this is the width of fabric. So you're just going to take your long piece of fabric, still folded, and you're going to cut 2.5 inches off of the edge. And for this quilt, it told me that I needed 3 width of fabrics according to the length of my fabric that I had. And so here's my 3 width of fabrics, and I've just cut them to 2.5 inches. Now there are some people that don't mind just putting their binding edge to edge with a straight seam. So they just go right here and then fold it back and they have a nice straight seam. But I prefer to use a diagonal seam because whenever you have a straight seam like this and you fold it all the times that you're going to fold your quilt, you're going to have a lot of bulk right here. And so I like to keep my bulk kind of even throughout my quilt. And so we're going to do a diagonal. And in order to do a diagonal binding, what you're going to do is you're going to open up your binding. You're going to put one side face up and one side face down. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut off my selvages. I usually leave them and just overlap them, but for this tutorial I'm going to go ahead and cut them off, and that way we won't have to worry about the selvages. So I lay them at an angle like this and like this, and as you see, this is kind of like a capital A. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line from here to here, and that is our line that goes across on the capital A. So let me get my marker and a straight edge. So all I'm using is a friction pin because this is the seam, but you don't want to use anything that could bleed through your fabrics. And so I'm finding where this corner right here is intersecting on this fabric. It's right here. Okay, and then we see this corner right here. So let me show you that a little closer. This right here is this right here. So I've just marked it right there so I can see it. And then we already see the corner here. We're just going to make a line from that corner here to where we marked right here, just to the edge of the fabric. And hopefully this friction pin works, yes. And then we can take some pins and we can put a pin here and we can put a pin here. Now, once you get good at making your binding, you could probably just sit at your sewing machine and just lay these 2 pieces, overlap them, and then eyeball this stitch. But when you're first starting, you do need to be using pins and drawing your lines. Now, if you have a diagonal seam tape, you can use that if it's on your machine. Okay, so once we have this one, now we need to go down and we need to do this one. So we're going to cut the selvage off of this one and off of this end. That way we won't have any of that in our binding. And since this is our new strip right here, I'm laying it at an angle like our capital A, And then I'm taking the strip that we had already attached something to, flipping it over so right sides are together. Okay, then we're going to do the same thing. We are going to mark where this intersection is on this fabric, right there. And we're going to draw a line from corner to corner. Then we are going to put a pin at the top corner because that will be out of our way when we're stitching. And at the bottom here, just keep it away from that line so you don't have to remove your pins. And there we're set. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew right on that line here and then on the other corner as well, and I'll be right back. And here we have those two pieces that I have sewn. Oops, there we have the line that I have sewn on the line. So we need to remove our pins and we need to check before we trim off those corners. They need to lay so that these edges right here are all running nice and even, just like this. Now, if you had done it incorrectly, yours may look something like this. And I'm exaggerating this, but it's not going to be nice and straight. So you need to make sure that you have sewn directly on that line and that line is going corner to corner. And if it is, this is what you're going to get right here, okay? So now that we know that they are nice and straight, we can cut this back triangle off. Actually, there's two of them, 1/4 inch away from that seam line, just like this. And we are good. Now, when we press this, I am going to be pressing my seams open because that will even allow them to be flatter. And again, we're trying to avoid bulk in our binding so that it looks nice and smooth all the way around and it doesn't cause us to have any trouble sewing it on. So now I'm going to grab my iron and we are going to fold this binding in half lengthwise, just like this. And we've got our iron here, so we are just going to iron this in half all the way down. And remember, my seams were folded open, so I just need to make sure they stay open when I iron them. So I will do this real quickly. And here we have our binding. Now, sometimes we like to make our binding ahead of time, or we make it one day and put it on the next. And after you press it, you just don't want to leave it piled up like this because you're just going to have to press it again. So we have things that are called binding holders, like this one. And this one's from Lori Holt, and it has a little beehive, I believe, on there with a little bee, and they come in, I think, various colors. I think this one came from Fat Quarter Shop from their Sew Sampler box. Then we have this one from Riley Blake. It is their binding holder, and it's real easy to use. You just put your binding right there, and then you wrap it. And you just keep it on these binding holders until you're ready to use it. And that way you have it nice and neat and together. If you are wanting to save money, you can just use a piece of cardboard. And this, I forgot what came in this, I think maybe ribbon or something. And you can just wrap it around a piece of cardboard like this. And this works just fine too. But you know, we're in our sewing room and we always like to be as cute as we can. So this is some fun little additional notions to have in your sewing room. I will put links to these in the description box below if you're interested. But again, a cardboard or something even that you make would be really fun. And there I have it all tucked in, and it's ready to set aside and stay safe. Now, if I'm going to go ahead and use it, it is still nice to have it like this because it kind of keeps it under control when I'm putting it on my quilt, and also it keeps it under control at my sewing machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going to my sewing machine, and I'm going to first attach this to the back of my quilt. And we're putting it on the back because we want to pull it to the front, and we want to top stitch the front so that we can see what it's looking like. I care about what it looks like on the front. I care about what it looks like on the back, but not as much as I care about what it looks like on the front. So I'm going to usually start at the bottom. On any project, for some reason, I just start at the bottom. I don't know if that's what everybody else does or it's just what I do. I think it helps me think that it's not gonna be as noticeable, maybe, that starting point, even though it's not even gonna, you're not gonna notice because it's just going to look like one of your seams that you have when you attach your binding together. So what I usually do is I leave a tail. And so if we divided this into thirds, I am going to bring this tail right here to this third, and then I'm going to start over here at this third. And this part right here is going to be hanging loose. Now, as you see, I have my raw edges. This is my open part right here. Let me show you. This is my open part, and we are placing that with the raw edges of the quilt. Now you can use pins, or you can use wonder clips or fabric clips, and you can hold this in place like that. What I tend to do is I just go to my sewing machine, and I might have one just there to start since I know where to start, especially if I have a big quilt and I just need to keep track of it. And if I have a bigger quilt, I'd probably put several on to get me started, just so I know where I'm going. Because sometimes when you've got this huge quilt, you're trying to figure out where one end is and where the other end is, and it's just kind of all wadded up at your sewing machine. So I'd probably put a couple in just to get started. But after that, I'm just going to use this and unwind it as I go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here where I have this clip, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch away from this edge. Now on my sewing machine, you are going to see that I have this right here, and this keeps my seams nice and straight and keeps my fabric from moving over this direction. It's kind of like a bumper. And so when I sew, I just keep my fabric pressed right against this, and I'll show you when I get to the machine and how it's set up. But it's got a very strong magnet. Now there's a lot of these out there, but if the magnet's not strong, it's not going to do you much good. This one takes quite a bit of pull to get it to come off the base of my machine. So be sure whichever one you get, it has a good magnet. I believe I've got this one at Fat Quarter Shop in one of their sew sampler boxes, so I will put a link to that in the description box below. So I am going to go ahead and take this to my machine, and I'm going to start by going 1/4 inch all the way down like this. Now, when I get to my corner, you're going to see me sewing along, and then right before I get to the edge, this edge over here, I am going to go off. And I try to go off right at the corner. If you can't hit the corner, hit closer to this side. Don't go off the edge here. And so here's where my sewing lines probably will be, something like this, and then I'm gonna go off. Now some people just stop right there and then lift up their presser feet and take their needle out and then pull it forward and do the folding and stuff. I like to just go ahead and go off, that way it just holds the fabric and the stitches. And then once I go off, I lift up my presser foot, I turn my fabric, and I kind of pull it out of the machine. You'll see me do this. And then I take, and this is all stitched all the way to here, I take this tail here now and I fold it up. And I want to make sure that this is going straight. This line goes straight. If it doesn't, it's going to affect your corners when you turn it in. And if you like nice, straight binding corners that match up really well when you flip it, be sure you do this really correctly. Then I'm going to fold it straight down. And again, I like to go right at the edge or just a little hangover, not much, just a little bit, because I want to make sure I have enough fabric for my fold. And then once I have it like this, it's ready to sew again. And so what I'll do is I'll put my needle right here and I will start sewing a 1/4 inch away from the edge again. And once I get to the next corner, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'll do that real quickly right here for you again. Again, I get to the end, I lift it straight up, and I'll get this over here. I lift it straight up. This line should be nice and straight. Then I keep it going up and down. Just overlap it, just like that. And either even with that edge or just a tiny, tiny bit hanging over. If you do it too short, that's where I find I start getting tighter corners that don't want to match up very well. So try to get it nicely like that. And then once you have it laid out like this again, stick it back under your sewing machine and all the way down to the next corner and then repeat. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to do this. Now the thread that you use for this part doesn't matter because it's not going to be seen, it's going to be hidden. But once we flip it over and start doing our top stitch, then we're going to worry about thread color, and I'll talk more about it then. But right now you can have whatever color thread you have on your machine already. All right, so here I have my binding right here, and I have my project that I'm working on. It's just laid out going the right direction. Here's where I wanted to start. Remember, we put that clip there. Now this is the little seam guide, and did you hear how quickly that stuck? And again, it is tricky to get off. So when I lay this down, I have my machine adjusted, so if it is right at the edge of my presser foot, it is going to be a 1/4 inch stitch. And I pull it forward a little bit so I have enough room to kind of guide it in there. So I'm going to take this off now. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, lift up my needle, and I'm going to scoot that right there. And it's going to butt right up against that seam guide. And my stitch is the right spot. And so here we go. I'm just holding the fabric, the binding, and just scooting it over as I need to. So we're coming up right now to our corner, and I can take a pin if I want. And I don't usually do this, I just kind of eyeball it. And this is where the fabric stops right there. So when I get to just about a 1/4 inch away, I'm going to drive toward that edge right there. And I usually pick it up from behind and I start going off the edge, and there I go. And so let me lift it up, pull this over here, and as you can see, I went off this, my binding actually stretched, so it really was a little bit off there. but I did go off at that corner, and that's fine. So now when I pick it up and I make it go straight, just like that, you see how that's straight right here? Okay, and this makes a nice straight line here. I'm gonna bring it down. Get a little better view there. I'm gonna bring it down, and I also want to make sure that this is lined up. So if it's not lined up, I need to bring it in just a little bit. So let me flip this back again, go straight, bring it down. And once you get good at this, it just takes a second. You just flip it up, flip it down, and you just keep going. At first, it's a little intimidating because you're learning, but it does get a lot easier. So now that I've got this, if I needed to, I could put a clip in here to hold it while I get it back over here. That's fine, but I usually just do this. My thread is still attached, but I'm just gonna get that out of the way of my edge here. And I'm gonna put my presser foot down, and away we go, 1/4 inch away again. And as I go, I just unwind my binder holder, just turn it, and it just unwinds. And again, I'm coming up to the edge, so I am just going to go straight off right there. Let's see how I did this time. Lifted up my presser foot, still have the string attached. Pull this ahead, and here's my stitch right here. Just fine. Just about went too far, but not quite. If you do go too far, what you're gonna have is an edge out here, so you'll just need to pick out a few stitches, and that's okay. And just leave it just like that. Just pick a few out and just leave it. So now I've got my thread back there. Let me flip this over. And let me back you up. So now what we're gonna do is make it straight, and it's nice and straight. Flip it down and make sure it's butted up to that back edge there. And we're off and ready to go again. Again, watch your threads there, get them pushed behind. Don't want them wrapped around your foot. And when I'm doing this video, I tend to pull it out further than I normally do so that you can see. So it's not usually that much string or thread. Okay, we're ready to go. And unwind some more binding. And this right here is our longer edge. And if you notice the little ripples, just pull on your binding, tug those out. It doesn't take but a slight tug. You're not stretching it out of shape or anything. Okay, we're coming up to the corner. And there we have that. we need to lift it straight up, just like that. Fold it back down. Oops. Got my camera right here too, so I'm kind of tight. Not used to having this camera right next to me when I'm sewing. Okay, there we go. Put it back in. Give us a little extra binding here. And we're off. Okay, so what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to go straight off, because I need to show you what it's going to look like if you go too far. Okay, so on this one, I did not curve upward. I just came off, and I didn't quite come off, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is fold it up, and actually I came close enough. If I had stayed on there, it would have hung over like this. And do you see there's a spot there? And that's not straight. Let's see if I can see, make sure you have the right angle. See that? It's hanging over. We don't want that. So if that happens, take out a few stitches, pull it back, and then you can go. And since I didn't quite go off of it, it didn't mess me up too much. I'll just pull on that one stitch and it pulls it up. So now it's nice and level and straight and even. So we're ready to go again. Fold it down. And we are on the edge that we started with, and we're just gonna go a short distance here. So just pull those things there. Myself a little binding. Okay, and again, I'm just going to go a short distance. Okay, now you can back it up and it will hold your stitch there. I don't like to back it up because sometimes I need a little extra binding, because I a lot of times go a lot further than this, and I sometimes need to pull a few stitches just to get a little more binding. But you can lock stitch it in just by backing up and then starting over again. But it's okay, because I'm going to be going over this stitch starting back up here, so it's not going to bother me. So now we can trim our thread off and look and see what we have. Okay, I wanted to lay this out here on this space because that way you can see exactly what we're doing. I normally do it right there where we were in front of the sewing machine, but I want you to see this because it's really one of the trickiest parts of putting binding on that really can make people nervous and frustrated. So as you see, we have the piece that is our tail right here, and we have the leftover binding right here. Not much, but a little bit. And then we finish sewing right over here, okay? And then here's where we finish sewing here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to decide where I want my seam to be, and I like to have it kind of in the middle, so I'm gonna have it somewhere right here. So I think I'm gonna trim this piece off just a little bit, okay? And this piece I'm going to be using. So we're gonna lay it back here, and I'm kind of pulling it nice and tight, but not, stretching it, but just making sure there's no ripples in it or anything, because I wanna make sure that it's going to sew on nicely. Now this is the piece that I cut off. If I open it up, this is 2.5 inches wide, because remember our binding was 2.5 inch wide binding. And this is the amount of overlap we need. So I'm going to come over here, and as you can see, get down here a little bit closer. And as you can see, this is the edge of the binding underneath. I'm letting it stick out just a little so you can see it. I am going to line this piece right here up with that. And remember, this is 2.5 inches. This is the width of our binding. If you had 2-inch binding, when you cut it off, this would be 2 inches wide, and that's the size you would need. Then I'm going to take, and where this binding ends is where I want to cut, right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut there. Make sure that this end is here. This is where we cut. Okay. Now I did cut a little extra, and I don't want that, but I like to cut, first of all, if I cut it right on the line, it would be right here. Okay. I like to cut mine about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch shorter. So after I cut it, I usually will come over here and about the thickness of a nickel, I will cut it shorter. So I cut about that much shorter. And the reason I do that is I find that when I'm stitching the binding on this last section, it tends to want to stretch a little bit, and then I have it kind of bubbling up. If I cut it so that it's just a tiny bit shorter, it seems to go down flatter. Some people like to flip theirs over and put this to the feed dogs at the end. That way that takes in that extra, and that's a good thing too, but I don't like it when I can't see my binding and I don't know where I'm sewing. So I like to do it from this top. Okay, so now once we have it trimmed to the right size, and it's a 2.5 inch overlap or less if you trimmed it, we're going to take and we're going to put our thumbs on the top, and we're going to put our fingers inside that binding. Let's see if I can get my finger in there. Open up that binding. Well, here. It's being stubborn. And we're just going to get the fingers in there. So we've got it like this. So we have our fingers inside and our thumbs on the outside. Okay, and when I pull it up, you know, I can lay it flat like that. Okay, had it this way, now it's this way. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to put it on top of this one so that it is matching this side and this edge. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and put some pins. One up here and one down here. Now this is the same thing we did when we put our binding pieces together. Remember? We just turned them into a capital A. There's our capital A. And what do we need still on the A? Well, we need the stick that goes across, and so that is this line right here. People get confused on where to draw or where to sew. Do I sew here, you know, or do I sew here? You sew across. So you can draw yourself a line if you want and just go from corner to corner. You'd use the corner that's underneath here, so it would be from here to here and draw a line. Or if you feel confident or have the seam tape, you can just take it to your sewing machine and draw from and sew from here to here. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll do that. And I don't think I need to take the camera over because all I'm doing is this to this, and then I'm going to bring you right back. Okay, so all I did was just stitch from corner to corner. Now let's take our pins out and let's lay this like this. And if it's not twisted and it lays flat, we are ready to trim this corner out of there. Now if it's twisted and doesn't lay flat, you're going to have to seam rip and then try again. But it should be quite easy to see where you made your mistake. Just follow these directions, just replay this until you get it. Now I do want this to be open. We're trying to have flat binding, not bulky binding. So I'll give a fingernail press there, and that's what I have. Now at this point, you can either use your clips or your needle or your pins, and I'm going to use pins. And I just put a couple there just to hold it in place when I sew it. Now when I go to my sewing machine, I am going to start probably 1.5 inches or so back, and I'm going to sew right on top of those stitches that I did a while ago. I didn't lock those, so I want to go over them now. And then I'm going to go ahead and do 1/4 inch all the way until I meet up here, and I'll go over them just a little bit, and then I'll back stitch and we'll be good. So I'm going to do that. Okay, and there we have it all attached. Now I'm going to take this and we're going to go back to the table over here where we can press it, and we're going to glue it down so that we can sew it on neatly. Okay, so we're back over here at the cutting table, and I have an ironing pad and I have my iron right here. I also have some washable school glue, and it is Elmer's. I don't know whether any other kind works, but this is the kind I've always used. It is the kind that is purple, but once it dries clear. Now I will say that if you're using a white binding that you can see through, you might want to use the liquid or the white glue sticks. I don't know if they still have the white glue sticks or not, but sometimes if you don't wash your quilt or wash out your project and the glue gets washed out, if you get it wet, I've noticed that sometimes that little bit of purple can come back, and it'll dry clear again and it'll go away. But if you don't want to ever see purple on your project and you're using white, just be sure you probably use just the regular Elmer's liquid school glue. The glue stick is just real handy because it's just easy to get it exactly where you need to get it. Now on colored things and stuff, I've never had a problem. I've just noticed when I steam or something that I've just glued down, I can see the purple coming through. It may eventually go away, I don't know. But that's just a heads up. Some of you may know something that you can leave in the comments that will help us. But just know that sometimes if that gets wet again and it's still in your project, it may turn purple until it dries. So here what we need to do first of all, I have some clips here too, is we need to take and we need to press our binding out. And just make sure there's no creases in here or little gaps in there where it's folded. And it's a little tricky to do all this on a small spot. So if you have a larger spot to iron, it'll go a lot easier. Even when I come to the corners, I give those a press, and I can go ahead and flip them that way at this time too. Now I am using a cordless iron, and this is just wonderful. This is a Panasonic cordless iron, and this one is for quilting. I'm not sure what the difference is. There's all different varieties and there's different colors. I have a lot of people always asking me, what kind of iron do you have? And I really like it. I haven't had it for a long time. I did have the Aliso, and I like that too. And what I noticed after my Aliso quit working was I was having a hard time remembering to set my iron up like this because the Aliso just pops up on its own. And so I had put a burn hole in my ironing board, or just scorched the fabric on my ironing board. And I thought, I don't know if I like this. And so I was gonna get another Aliso, but then I thought, well, a cordless would be really nice for especially tutorials that I do with you guys. And as long as it has its stand, I know I have to put it in the stand to get it hot again. So when it's off the stand, it is not heating, but it's hot enough to do, projects and things like that. If you were working on pressing a whole quilt and you were going to have it off the stand for a long time, I wouldn't use it. I would use one that has a cord, because it would cool down as you iron, unless you keep setting it back down to recharge. And it just reheats within a few seconds because it has a little light that says it's hot again. And you have 3 settings. You can go low, medium, or high. And I always do it on high with quilting. And you have a water reservoir that comes off. It's just really nice. So if you like to have something that's easy and portable, this is really nice. It's got a little lid to put on it, and so you can take it to retreats and things like that too. So it's just really nice. Okay, so I've got all my binding pressed nicely. Now let's turn it over, and we are ready to pull this binding forward, okay? Now when we're pulling it forward, our goal is to cover up that seam that we just made when we sewed the binding on. I also like to pull it far enough away so that when I stitch right on this edge here, because I'm going to get really close to this edge when I stitch it, I want to try to be on this white fabric and try to be in that ditch. Now, I haven't mastered having it always in the ditch. There are ways of doing that, but you have to be very exact, and it doesn't bother me if my stitches are off a little bit back here. You never notice it. You never notice it. Now, since this binding is green, I am going to use a thread that matches it, because that way my stitches will even be more invisible. And on the back, I'm going to use white, because white is where I want my stitches to go. And if it goes down, across the white here, it's going to be a big green stitch. I'm going to try to avoid my binding, but if I get on my binding, it's no big deal. But I'm going to try to avoid it and stay in the white, or ideally right there in the ditch. So what I'm doing is I'm thinking, okay, how far do I usually stitch? And I'm pulling it far enough that I know the overlap is where my stitch is going to be. And so my stitch is going to be right here, and that is going to be off of the binding in the back, okay? So what we need to do is grab our glue, and I'm just gonna start here in the middle and go this way. Whichever way you decide to go that way the whole time, because your corners are going to fold the same direction that way. If you start here and do this corner and then come back here and do this corner, your corner's gonna be folded a little differently. So I always like to go one direction the whole way around. It doesn't matter which direction, but just continue it all the way around. Okay, so all I do is I take my glue stick and I just put it on the edge of my quilt on that side of the stitch. I try not to go over the stitch much. It might have a little bit over, but whatever I'm covering up is fine. And just put plenty of it on there. And then you're going to flip it over and cover it the amount you need. And if your iron is handy, just iron it as you go. If not, put clips on it and then take it to your iron. But I like to iron it as I go, because I can tell that I can get a better looking binding. Okay, now I'm gonna go around the corner here, making sure I have enough in that corner. And I usually go about 4 inches. And again, keeping that binding where I need it to be. Now, once I get to the top here, and I'm going to bring you down. Once I get up here to this corner, and let's just turn it, I'm going to take this is a stiletto. It's a clover stiletto. It's actually a tailor's awl stiletto, but it is really handy for this. It's nice, and it's got a really sharp point, so it can grab the fabric nicely. And I'm going to lay it right there where it is right on the edge of my quilt. And I am going to bring this down so that it is in the area that I want it to be. And do you see how that point right there matches my binding right there? That's what I like right there. So I think I'm going to add just a little more glue. It dries really quickly, especially on days where it is dry. And so I'll put a little more glue there. And then again, put this here, pull it down, make sure it's covering your stitch line, just like that. Okay, and if you need to square it up there at the tip, you just pull it up there with that. So let's put some heat on that and let it dry. And there we have our first corner. Now we're going to continue. So find where we stopped. And again, I just pull this out about 4 inches around. Turn it. I've got a few threads right here. That was from my quilting. Missed those. Again, just like that. And there we have, I'm just pushing it down so it's not gapping on you. There we have our nice corner there. Then we have a nice straight stretch. These are nice. So if you have a big quilt, this isn't hard to do. When you have a big one, just do a long stretch of glue, grab your iron, hopefully your ironing board's a little bigger than mine. Do this. And since I've been doing this goes so quick. And I've been so happy with the results. As long as you've got your binding attached nicely, you should have no problem. Now sometimes your seams may end up falling on a corner, and it shouldn't be any big deal, but it may add a little bit of bulk, so don't worry about it, but there may be a little extra bulk there. Just about to where we started. And remember, this doesn't have to stay down for life like this, just so it's temporary and that you can stitch it down without having to use a bunch of pins. And there we have it. Our binding is all glued down, and we can take it over to the sewing machine and sew it. And I am going to bring you over because I'm going to show you a foot that I have purchased recently that has been a big game changer for me. So let me grab that. So here is the presser foot that I just recently purchased, and it is a wonderful foot, and it is called an edge sewing presser foot. And it has been a real game changer. I find that I can get a really nice, accurate seam, and it stays nicely spaced on by my edge. And this goes with my JUKI. It is foot R. Now I have a JUKI that's not the quilting machine. It's actually an HZL, and it's an older version. It's from probably 14, 15 years ago or more. It's an HZL G210, and it is a low shank machine, and it can move its needle because it also has embroidery stitches with it and some lettering and stuff like that. So this works really nice on my machine, and I think it would be one that could work on any sewing machine that's low shank. If you have the foot that has the attachment that lets you snap on your feet like this and then push a button in the back to release the foot, then you should be able to use this. And this is just something that you can purchase on Amazon. A lot of sewing machines, that's what they come with. But there's some that work with certain sewing machines and some that work with others. I don't think Bernina would probably have the ability to use this, and Bernina probably has a edge seam or edge sewing presser foot that will work for it. I think for the high shank JUKI, there is a special foot also, and I had originally tried to find that one, but it only came in the high shank, and then I was able to find this one, and it works really nicely. It allows you to set your machine to how far away you want your stitch from the middle. And so what you'll do is you'll just put this edge, this piece that sticks down right in the middle. It's right in the middle. You'll put that right where your binding is hitting the fabric. So you'll just kind of sew right up against that binding there. And if your sewing machine has the needle so far over this way, it will keep that distance perfect all the way to the end. And you can get, you know, 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, whatever you want your edge to be. It's also great for top stitching, like handles, or top stitching on bags and purses or clothing, doing top stitching. But I found that it works so nicely on these quilting projects. So if I find something similar to it, there's probably some that are no name brand that are similar to it. I will link them. But your sewing machine may have something similar to it. And again, it has that right in the middle, but you do have to have a machine that can move its needle back and forth like this, okay? So this is what I'm going to put on my sewing machine. Now, the other thing that I'm going to be considering as I go to sew my binding on is my thread color. So I went, since my binding is green, I went to my thread drawer and I pulled out a couple of different greens. And just by looking at this through the camera lens right now, I can see some that really stand out that I know for sure don't work. And I pretty much knew for sure they weren't gonna work, but I just want you to see a variety of greens. Now, if you only have one green in all of your thread, if it looks fine with it, by all means use it. You can always use white or a tan or even a darker color. I find that going darker versus lighter helps to set that stitch into the shadows, and it looks more like a shadow instead of a stitch. But so I always go darker. If I have a choice between a light and a dark, one that's lighter and one that's darker, I'll go with the one that's darker. So right off the hand, when you look through the screen, you can see that that is really bright, and I think that would really show up. So we're going to take that one off. This one is too dark. This one is too light. This one has too much blue in it. And so I'm down to these three. And on these three, this is more of an olive, this is a lighter color, and this is a little bit more blue. So if I lay this one out, I like to just take some thread and lay it out. That blends in pretty good. So if I only had this one right here, this would work just fine. But I still can see it a little bit, and it's still got a little bit of blue showing up. So if I have something that works a little better, I'll do that. But if not, this would work just fine. So let me try this one. So this one I lay on there, and this one looks good too. This one or the other one before would be, either one of these would work. This is a little lighter than the binding, and I know that it's hard for you to see. Let me move you down a little bit. It's probably hard for you to see that very well, but as you can see, it blends in pretty good. You might not be even able to see it. So that would be fine too. Then I have this one right here, and it's a darker color, but when I lay this one on there, I don't see it with my eyes when I'm standing here. It blends in. It's darker, so it's more of a shadow than a stitch. And I think this one is the one I'm going to go with. But like I said, either of these two would work also if that was all you had. So I'm gonna put this on my needle, and then because the background of my backing, this is white, I'm gonna use white in my bobbin. So let me get my machine set up, and then I'll bring you over and we'll do the top stitch all the way around so I can show you how to machine bind your quilt. All right, so I'm gonna change my presser feet. I've got my green thread at the top and my white thread at the bottom. And again, this just snaps on. And I won't be needing this. And we are going to be top stitching the binding on our quilt. Now, I like to start again at the bottom, and I like to give myself just a couple of inches from a corner. So I'll just start right here. That way, when I come around this corner, I can connect to it. So let me lift this up, put this down, and as you can see, I'm putting it down directly next to that edge of the binding. It's just going to ride right alongside of it. And then I need to decide my stitch width, and I can look at where my needle is going down right here. Right now it is going down and just taking like a thread out of that binding, and I want it to take about a quarter. I'd like maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. So let me see if I can get my needle moved and see where that is. That looks pretty good. Okay, I think I'm going to do that, and I'm going to take that thread and put it underneath there so it doesn't get hung up on my presser foot. Okay, let me look again. Yeah, I think I like that. All right, so here's we go. And I'm going to go just 1 stitch or 2 stitch back. And then forward. And that one came up away from that just a little bit, so I'm giving it a little extra room. you see, I'm going at a pretty quick pace. Okay, now when I come down to the edge here, I'm going to do a nice and slow stitch because getting over this hump without moving my binding is important. And then I want to get over to the other edge of the binding, right there. Then I'm going to turn it, and my presser foot goes up a little higher since that piece hangs down, and it allows me to lift it up and out of the way. So far you can see, look how nicely that looks. Can you see those stitches? Just really nice. Okay, now let's try this. Presser foot down. And this is real time. And because I have it all glued down, I can just zip it on. And see, whenever you go over the binding, that piece of metal that sticks out right there can kind of move it. So just be careful that your binding is flat. And I go just a couple stitches in, and then we turn. And that matched up nicely right there. Slow right here. And we are almost done. If I were hand sewing it, it would take a lot longer than this, even including the time it took to glue it down. You can glue it down real quickly too. Here's where we met, or where we started. This is where we want to meet, right here. So I'm going to go just about a half of an inch over that. And then back stitch 1 or 2 stitches. Pull it out, trim off our thread. And let's take a look at that. There we are. Let me back up just a little bit. All right, do you see that? Doesn't that look nice? Nice and even. And I like to have it really close to the edge. It doesn't stick out as much. When you've got it farther away, you've got a little bit of a flap there, and I don't care for the flap. So it looks really nice. And let's look at the corners. Perfect. And here is our pepper runner all finished, and the binding looks great. And on the back, and you can see that I hit the ditch here, which was really good. And this is good too. So it gets close to that ditch, but doesn't always hit it, but you don't see the stitch on the white. So I think this turned out great. And again, machine binding a quilt or a project that you're working on is super easy. You just need to take your time, and it gets easier every time you do it. So I hope you enjoyed this video on how to bind a quilt. And if you did, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to like and share. And as always, I hope to see you back here soon. Bye-bye.